Growing up in the 80s and 90s, I fell in love with film and the broadcasting industry. I had aspirations of producing my own films and running my own entertainment news channel. Now, while I don't think any of these are out of the picture quite yet at the current stage of my life, I've enjoyed watching the growth of these industries with introduction of media platforms like YouTube and Netflix. So anytime I meet someone who is making a living producing video or music content, I'm always intrigued by their story and how they became an entrepreneur in the space.
Welcome to This Professional Life, a podcast by Convos Media about trending topics related to all things in the professional services world, from lawyers to accountants and other business-to-business service providers.
Hey everyone, I'm Chris Young and welcome to this episode of This Professional Life. Now, Ian Bennett is the co-founder and co-owner of Lifted, a video and music production company in Colorado that he runs with his wife to create brand films and online marketing campaigns for small, medium-sized businesses. Now, growing up, Ian was always surrounded by family and other friends that were very business-oriented, and he points to that as an influencing factor in his decision to become an entrepreneur. One of his very first jobs was in sales, and he credits some of his earlier experience in that role to give him the confidence and skill set to strike out on his own.
So I got a job, and my first intro into the workspace was in sales. And that's really where I kind of cut my teeth on learning how to, those interpersonal skills, relating to people, face-to-face sales, as well as customer service. Because when you're working at, my first job was at the Gap, then went into I guess my favorite retail spaces were Finish Line. So, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, there was shoe galore. There still is, but that's how that was. That was the time, right?
Yeah.
And so learning how to, size a person up and see, what their style was from the time they walked in, to listening to what their concerns were, to, helping them find the right styles. It was all those interpersonal skills that really were both sales and customer service. And I really enjoyed that. And then if you fast forward on to college, post-college, I ended up finding myself working at a university. And that's where I kind of learned the art of the pitch. So as opposed to those quick sale moments, it was really taking a deeper dive into like a potential college student coming in, hearing about where they've been, hearing about where they want to go, and trying to help them find that path to success so they can get on the right, educational track. Really was a step up from just those quick sales type of opportunities that I was learning before. And it was such a blessing for being a business owner, because it's these micro steps that lead up to, the big platform of kind of having to manage all of that, and perhaps seeing how to delegate that, as you build a team or find other people. But if you don't really have those, experiences for yourselves, that process is a lot harder.
So was that a recruitment type role in the colleges? Or what type of role was it?
I was an admissions representative. So essentially when an individual would come in and they were looking to figure out life, that's a lot of what the mindset was. They know that they needed to go. There were some people who were like, you know what, I want a business degree, or you know what, I'm going straight into the medical field. Most people were unsure. And so, yes, it was very much kind of like a counselor role, because, in about an hour and a half, you sat down with someone, you had to, well, let me back it up. My sales skills started on the phone because, after the interpersonal skills, I did spend a lot of time in call centers. Call centers is a whole nother beast.
Yeah.
But, it was vital too, because as a business owner now, I do a lot of conversations on the phone that lead to face-to-face. Mm-hmm. And so you would spend time speaking to a person on the phone, you would set the appointment, then they'd come in and you'd spend about an hour, kind of refreshing yourself on what you had learned on the phone, digging a little bit deeper into their current state of life, and then helping them come to a decision about what program they were going to choose. So that was my role in the university.
That's a huge that's a big skill set. Like, you know, in my experience as a manager, that's one of the things that sales individuals often struggle with is the listening to customers and digesting, you know, what their issues are.
Yeah.
And then applying that to, well, what kind of solutions can I come up with them? And I feel like what you went through with the career path setting, almost counseling, like that, you have to dig really deep to ensure that that student really finds, like, you know, their sense of purpose. Like what is it exactly they want to do? Like that seems like just a very difficult thing.
It can be, because it can also be very emotional, and it's
Right.
very personal. And people were often at times of like really trying to rebuild their life. So it was very important not to treat it like it's a shoe sale, right? Because
Right.
typically, you know, people are very complex, even though we're also very simple, right? The dichotomy of that. But, you know, you have to be careful when peeling back that onion not to treat them like a commodity. And that, and to me, that was very, very important, because, you know, I love people, even though sometimes I don't like them that much. But, you know, it's like we're all kind of that way, right? We have to balance that. And I really wanted to make sure, especially when, you know, in the beginning of that time, you're talking about a significant investment, and you have a impressionable person who may not fully understand what it means to take on student loans or to finance their education. So, it was a huge primer for, you know, being an entrepreneur, because when you're talking about a business owner who might have already invested $200,000-$300,000, if more than that, in their business, and for whatever reason things aren't going the way that they want, and they come to you who has for a solution, it's important to have empathy, and it's important to be able to listen and to guide them with your expertise the right way. So it was a perfect trajectory for where I am right now.
So from there, where did you move on to afterwards?
Yeah. So, again, my parents were extremely instrumental in helping me develop a entrepreneurial mindset. They had different businesses, you know, together. And at that point in my life, when I was a young adult, married and we had one child, we had already started a business, this business, Lifted Film and Music, but we were still working a job. I was still at the university. And a quick tip for anybody who, especially going through business school, and you have a desire to be in business for yourself. One kind of they got all the hacks now, right? College hack that I look back and go, well, I'm glad I followed my instinct on this, was every project that we had for business, for most other people, it was a hypothetical business. They didn't really know what they wanted to do, or maybe they did, but they didn't utilize their business as their, so to speak, case study, their actual assignment. I did that all through college. So when other people were doing business assignments, well, what if you had a business? How would you build this out? Other people were doing it for the project. I was doing it for real life. So that was really cool. And it was a good way to condense timeframes, which is something that, is very helpful at this stage in my life, because like all of us, the older you get, time seems to move faster. So, but my mom, she was a brilliant scientist. She worked with the Denver Water Department for 20 plus years. And at this time, she was coming to the end of her tenure there and had started her own business. And it was exciting because, we were, she was popping up on LinkedIn and in different articles and things of that nature. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with cancer. And, it was probably 7 months from the time what we found out to the time that she passed.
Oh, wow.
And so she did my sister is an amazing artist, guitar player and singer, and I'm a music producer as well. And we both grew up singing in the church and stuff back in the day. So my mom left us a death benefit, a little chunk of change, so to speak, to help us keep moving. So my sister and I said, hey, let's invest in a camera and let's do a tribute video to Mom. Music video. And we did that. And my wife, who had never edited anything, I was like, hey, I bought this software. Learn how to use it. Right. Help us, please. She's like, I'm not an editor. And she ended up figuring it out and put it together. And from that moment, people gave us some good response from that. And we started getting requests for weddings and different type of video projects.
Did you upload this to, like, was this distributed on YouTube, or what did you
No,
do?
we had it up. I have it somewhere on the hard drive now. It's not really out there for people to see. It's kind of keep it close to the collar now. But yeah, and that was kind of like the genesis of us going into business. And eventually it led to us like going full time. And taking the leap to be a full-time business not too long after she had passed.
At what point in your life did you have an interest or take an interest in film and music production?
It was early. I mean, when I was a kid, I had, I'm a writer at heart. I grew up loving literature and poetry. So that's where a love for hip hop developed. And in the house, we always had gospel and jazz going. So, that's kind of the roots of my music love. And then I remember there was a time where, I, like a lot of 90s kids, wanted to be Jordan. I want to be like Mike, right? And so, seeing some of those hoop dreams, so to speak, fade, and you realize, okay, maybe I won't be the next Jordan or make it to the league. I remember my mom took me to a movie with Sean Connery. It was called Finding Forrester. And it was about an inner city kid, this one, okay, who had like the secret love for writing, but was also trying to be a baller and play and go to the league and all that stuff too. And I remember that I was in a space where, unsure of the future. And I went and saw that movie and was just so inspired. One, because it was like, you don't have to give up one dream to pursue another dream. But walking out of that theater feeling hopeful, I was like, this was really powerful. And
amazing.
Yeah. And I remember, the story with my mom passing, like kind of how we even came to the idea of doing a video is because in my sales, one of my career paths was selling cell phones. So I was part of that time where cell phones were going from flip phones to all kind of different cameras, and she had passed, and I found like 1 minute and 30 seconds of footage of her, on one of these old cell phones. And so it was like, I want to take that and pass it forward. So I would say, in addition to that movie and also Michael Jackson being a part of my background, like music was always a part of our life. Film was always a part of our life. But I would say that was when it started to really, the seed was sown to want to inspire other people through those two art forms.
I want to go back to when you decided to run this as a full-time business, because I know a lot of, aspiring entrepreneurs struggle with that, right? They have the full-time job, they've kind of got this project started on the side and with aspirations of running it full-time. Sure. How did you know that it was time to go all in?
Yeah. So one of the keys to being successful, I believe, is time blocking, right? You've got to manage your time well. And I remember feeling the pressure when I had to check into a job, that I was supposed to be at for 6 to 7 hours, right? And then also having obligations to business that were outside of that, and trying to manage both of them. And at first it's like, hey, maybe there's a call I can make on a lunch break. No big deal. Set an appointment for the weekend. I'm good. But as you consistently build and produce good results, God willing, you're going to have more people who are interested. And there comes a point where you're like, I can't be in two places at once. Now, my particular, I'm laughing because I'm just getting back to the moment of when it all happened. But I remember I had a great boss at the school who was kind enough to let me, use my swing time to be able to go a little bit more unorthodox than normal. And so I remember there was times where he was like, sure, you can take an extra lunch break, but you'll make up this hour here, blah, blah, blah. Right. Well, the school ended up going through a period of layoffs. And so we had survived, when I say we, my wife and I, we had survived, layoffs. And it could kind of see the writing on the wall. So I remember preaching to people like, you guys need to either be looking for something else or you need to start a business. And they were like, nah, we'll be fine. It's a big company, yada, yada, yada. And the final day there, I had already, the day before, had a whole afternoon of appointments that were set up for my business. And I remember I was supposed to show up in the morning. He was going to give me the afternoon off. I was supposed to show up in the morning to kind of handle one or two appointments, get some paperwork done. And I walk into the building and I'm like, where are all the students? And then as I'm walking around to my desk, I'm looking at like a whole bunch of like cardboard boxes like on everybody's desk. And I'm going to myself, uh-oh, something's up. Well, yep. The reality was the school had finally reached the point where it was shutting down. And I walked in, basically got a severance check. And before I had an opportunity to panic, I found myself working my business in the afternoon. And I say all that to say I was kind of pushed out of the plane. When Steve Harvey's video dropped about jumping, I think that's a great one for everybody to watch. I had already been feeling like, jump, just go ahead and do it. But I honestly didn't have the guts to do it. I was so scared. I had children, I had a wife, and, there was businesses sometimes up and down. But in my case, it was like God was like, you know what? I'm taking this away from you, and
you're taking the leap.
You're going. And I'm thankful for that. The only regret that I kind of don't really have, if that's fair to say, is that just not taking it myself, like just actually like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, stepping off, onto that solid ground and trusting that instinct. I think that would have helped me a lot more in the months after that event to trust myself.
Right.
Yeah.
So you take the leap. You're in this now. Do you recall some of the early projects that you took on once you went full time?
So our genesis was weddings, right? And so we had a lot of weddings, and we had a lot of family photos and stuff as far as like in that period of taking the leap. So we have been blessed to do a lot of weddings, which has been really cool as a married couple to do a lot of those things. But in the full-time space, weddings held us down. And then, we started to kind of look at, the time and the workload. And, there's also the period where you're not really valuing yourself properly, right? So, you're giving people the best deals they'll never see again in their life, while weeks later you're like, man, we should have charged a whole lot more for this. But you live and you learn. So weddings was a big part of our foundation, and that was a really, really good good learning experience, because we were very much kind of guerrilla style filming, for those who know what that means, and documentary style. So you learn quick and you learn fast.
I was just gonna mention that. I know because I filmed a couple weddings. I've not done tons of wedding videography, but it's stressful because the bride and groom, they have one moment, and you can't say cut, let's go back and redo that. either we got the footage or we didn't. And then you're in post-production and you're going, oh my God,
Yeah.
something happened, technical difficult, whatever. But like, and you did a lot of weddings. So super stressful.
Super stressful. But you know what? I think the first wedding that we did was such a disaster. It kind of like, it kind of like diffused a lot of the stress. I mean, everything from, it was my wife and I and a good friend of ours. All of us kind of done doing weddings now, but from me stepping on the bride's veil, from my wife almost knocking over one of the live candles, walking backwards, trying to take pictures, to our friend needing a charger and decides to just pull out a random plug, which happened to be to the DJ.
What?
and the bride herself, who was a split family, taking a Xanax and then drinking alcohol and having a complete meltdown before all this even started. Yeah, it was one to remember. But it's good because we learned how to handle pressure, and we learned how to really also be humble in admitting mistakes. This is something that our culture, I think, struggles with right now, both in business and in politics and personally. Like, you're going to mess up. There's this overwhelming need or desire, it seems, for people to cover up your mistakes, when really it's like, don't do that, because you're going to make them. And when you do that, you break your trust with your client and even with yourself. Right. As a business owner, you've got to know how to evaluate when something isn't working. And if we build up this cognitive dissonance in our head where we can't recognize when we're making a mistake or where something is going the wrong direction, something that could have been corrected maybe in 3 days' time could set you back 3 months, 3 years. So, yeah.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because, clients almost want you to be not almost, they want you to be truthful. Like, own up and admit to the mistake and then come up with a solution, right? And versus, as you said, like, if you're trying to cover up the truth, it hits you harder down the road, because the truth will always come to the surface.
Absolutely. And I think that another thing that is perhaps a misconception about big businesses is that they're constantly putting out fires. We might look at Apple and think that everything looks pristine and shiny and under control all the time, but it's a tech business. That, there's all kind of, issues that are going on behind the scenes. I think the difference is the approach is like, that's not taboo. That's not something that you're afraid of. It's literally a mindset that when challenges come, we're going to overcome it. And there's a style in which we overcome it, open communication, transparency. We have, whatever our go-to techniques are for X, Y, Z. And when in production, especially film production, I learned on movie sets to embrace the mistake, because both in film production and in music production, some of the greatest gifts that we all enjoy in those cinematic and music experiences did happen by accident. And there's countless stories of where, people were like, well, I'll give you a quick example. United Airlines, they're what is the blue? Oh, I'm forgetting the name of the actual music, but it's a piece of music that, if you grew up in the 90s, it was part of every commercial. And dun 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 dun. Yeah, in the beginning of that, there's a clarinet, and that clarinet piece was actually one of the musicians just kind of warming up and doing his thing, getting ready to do the other part of the piece. And when the composer heard it, he was like, "That's brilliant. Keep that in." And now, when you listen to that full musical piece, that's one of the most recognizable parts, and actually was a big part of United's, because the whole thing is like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 minutes long. It's a really long piece. And they use that snippet in the beginning and the climax at the end. And that's what was recognizable to, kids and people our age growing up. So, yeah.
aside from some of the technical difficulties in your early on in the wedding videography and production,
Yeah.
what other major challenges have you faced as an entrepreneur running your own business?
The biggest one is going to be fear. You have to be able to manage fear, and you have to understand, what it is and what it's teaching you. I'm a huge Batman fan, and I've drawn so much from, how he embraced fear and utilized it to his advantage. That's something as a business owner you're going to deal with, and you have to learn how to embrace that feeling. One of the best techniques to managing that is to have a plan, and kind of going back to, the time blocking. Fear will eat you alive if you're not busy, right? If you're in one of those periods where, you could be too much in your head and not enough, actually working, it'll have you spinning your wheels. So having a plan for your day, I say learn in the blocks, right? You need to learn block timing where, you have, okay, I'm doing this at 9, I want to move into this at 10, and I want to move into this at 11. I'm going to eat. A lot of times that's one of the biggest keys to help you keep us from just sitting in fear and managing, your time well in that regard. And then, when you have an idea, giving it time. Tim, who we talked about before, has always says, give it 90 days, right? Give it a quarter. You have a good idea. It's not always going to take off in, a week. Give it time. So, understanding time, blocks of time, specifically, your daily routine, and then also that 90-day period. Give things time and stay focused. That helped us, and still does help us overcome, the fear of uncertainty. Is this working? Is this gonna be the right direction?
Right.
And you need that.
It's a double-edged sword for entrepreneurs, isn't it? Because on one hand, you love the freedom to explore, to try new things, to take on new challenges. But on the other hand, as you said, there's that fear.
Yeah.
Well, what if it doesn't work? Because there's no one there to tell you that this is going to work or not.
Right. Yeah. And learning how to trust your intuition is difficult, because most of us come from a structure where the teacher is instructing and we get used to that. Your boss is instructing. But when it becomes you instructing yourself, you still have to have discipline. And that's the key. You have to, in a way where, for lack of a better terms, a slave to something, right? And we have to kind of understand a broader sense of what that can mean, in the sense of, like, you've got to be dedicated to something, sometimes even when it hurts. And
right.
that's a challenge. But if you have a plan that you can follow, and you can be disciplined to that plan, what it does is it kind of divides purpose from emotion. So you can say, okay, regardless of how I feel today, I have a purpose and I have a plan that I'm going to follow. And giving that process in itself time is something that, when you fulfill it, you can look back and gain confidence from what you've done. Good examples like a workout, right? Or changing something in your diet. In some cases, you can feel good right away, but the true benefit comes over time. And following that plan and having that understanding is vital to your success, so you don't make quick emotional decisions or indecisions that cost you.
You mentioned you're not doing as many weddings now, I believe. So what's the new focus right now for Lifted?
Yeah, so our focus is actually in helping other businesses, entrepreneurs, small to medium and even big businesses, with their vision, with their storytelling. That is vital. I mean, that's how we're wired as individuals to communicate is through stories. And brand films is where we kind of, that's our kind of flagship, right? When we were growing in the wedding field, a lot of the times people would get their wedding videos back and be like, man, I felt like I just watched, my movie, right? Like, because there's so many aspects that are happening during a wedding that the wedding couple misses. And it was dramatic change too. And as far as feedback between couples who had just chosen us for photography versus video, because it's just such a broader perspective of that day that for them goes by like, a flash. And so the way in which we were doing it, we saw, well, this is very powerful because they're saying it's like they're able to sit in on parts of their wedding that they missed. And that was really important for them, especially when you think about friends who've flown in, family from all over the world. Those are special moments. And some of them they missed, and they're able to relive through that. So that storytelling factor, again, from the movies was really huge. And so with businesses, it's really, our process is really understanding, who and what the business is, what purpose they serve, who they're trying to reach. And then what is the storyline that's going to help them communicate properly? Because often when we, in our genesis of working with businesses, they understood the power of video, but they didn't understand the power of storytelling. And there was this huge period where we were running into client after client after client who had spent good money with a quote unquote videographer, but their video wasn't landing. It wasn't moving people. And time again, it was that there was no story. There was no arc for their audience to follow that was leading them from what is my problem and what is my solution. And so that is the main focus of what we bring to the table.
Let's talk more about the business, because digital content has become massive over the last, it started probably a decade and a half ago, but I would say in the last few years, it's just ramped up. Yep. It just ramped up because of, all the platforms, especially short form, right? TikTok and all those. And it's gotten everybody who has a smartphone is now a videographer. So content is king at this point. But what are your thoughts? Because I would say, like, a lot of our clients on the content side are professionals, whether it's accountants, lawyers, financial planners, and they're always a bit behind. And I noticed this on the marketing and business development front too, in my experience. These professionals are always just a little bit behind. And so I'm starting to see professionals start to think about digital content and how that impacts their business. And it's interesting because you and I met at QuickBooks Connect, where it's room filled with professionals. But seemingly you and I were the only ones videoing with our camera. Yeah. But what are your thoughts when it comes to digital content and professionals? And what do you think is like, what are you seeing on that front?
So one, I think there's just going to be more of it. And I think a lot of the people that we encountered at QuickBooks were of the mind that, well, yeah, content is king, but who wants to see video about accounting? Right. And I remember my aunt, she used to work for what was Luke Skywalker, not the Luke Skywalker of Star Wars. It was Slip and Slide Records back in the early 90s, Trick Daddy and Trina. And so we had great conversations about music. And I remember a period of time where I was thinking to myself, why am I even doing music? There's so much, it's so saturated. And that's a lot of times how it feels today. But she would tell me, she was like, you got to look at the realities of where we are today. She's like, there is something out there for everyone. There is a niche out there for everyone. As weird or as abstract as you might think it is, someone is looking for content. And she would say, and someone's looking for your content. And I believe that's true. I'm really thankful for that, because really what's going to happen is things are going to go, well, things aren't going to go backwards, so to speak, as it relates to a digital presence outside of, getting set back to the Stone Ages somehow. So there's always going to be a need for competitive businesses to have an online presence. We just need to accept that fact for any of us who are resistant to that.
Right.
But I think the key is that we have to look at it through the right lens as well. And no different than, an interpersonal relationship and the importance of that, whether it's business to business or B2C, that doesn't change just because we're communicating with them online. So I think one of the things that, I would want to just kind of share with people is understanding that it is still a relationship that you're going to have. It's just through a different medium. And so the importance of understanding that is if you don't nurture your relationships, then they die. So one, you need to have a open communication. You need to be on the platform to find people where they're at. But then you need to have a plan to keep that communication, to keep that relationship going. So you have to find ways to continue to, communicate and build that relationship with your target audience through video and through sound as well.
Speaking of technology adoption, thoughts on the future of video production? I'm seeing a lot of crazy things out there, from AI to some new technologies that leverage, work processes with AI. What are your thoughts on what we're going to see in the next, I say like 2 to 5 years for video production?
I don't know. Maybe it might be like 2 to 5 minutes, man. It's moving so fast.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's, again, it's hard to say. One of the things that I've also realized, though, is that, AI really has been around already, especially in music and also in film and photography. Adobe, Final Cut. A lot of these softwares have elements of AI in it. I'm a big fan of anime. And, you can see the difference in some of the animations where it's like, okay, they might be utilizing more of the traditional styles, but then there's like a cut or a scene that's like, oh, that's definitely computer, right? That's
right
out of this world. And really the first AI animation that I visually remember, my sister and I were just talking about this, was Disney's Beauty and the Beast. And there's this scene where they go into the ballroom, and I remember sitting in the theater back in the 90s going, this looks like a video game. This is not pencil and and that's when that was one of their last, old school animation movies where they, but even then they blended it. So one, it's been around for a while. I think that in the artist space, it's going to be a challenge with authenticity, being able to be perceived. So I can say, I think in the music world, I think as it's always been, live performances is going to be key, to keeping going. And AI will be an add to that. I think the concerts and the visuals are going to be through the roof. I think as it interfaces more with the audio space, you're going to see amazing things in that world from the music perspective. And then in film, that's a tough one, man. I think you just it's going to be a gift and a curse. One area though that I really like is in the entrepreneurial world is like what you were talking about, is with the chat things. I do love leveraging technology because, like I said, I love people, but I don't always like people, right? And so leveraging technology to be able to help us grow our business, it's vital. And it allows us to make sure that we can build relationships with the real people who come into our business at the proper pace. So it's not a revolving door of people who may or may not be interested in really working. And so when it comes to building content and that conversational piece from copy, I think it's going to be a huge benefit to a lot of people to be able to help them be consistent. And as a writer, I know how difficult it is to write sometimes. Sometimes you're in the flow mode, and sometimes it's like there's a brick wall. To have these tools to assist with making sure that we don't fall off in our business responsibilities, I think is going to be one of the best things. So all in all, I think that for the side of me that's kind of like, this is going to be a little scary. I look back and it's always been here, and it's like anything else. It's going to be determined on how we use it. If we use it ethically and morally, it's going to be beautiful. It's only going to enhance the human experience. And yes, there's going to be outliers who are going to use it nefariously, but for every Goliath, there's a David. So we'll be all right.
Yeah. I think as advanced as AI is going to get, I think one thing it's not going to replace is probably, and what you've mentioned that you do in your business, is that storytelling aspect. I know there's AI out there that has like ability to write a children's book right now, and you could just feed it its parameters. But I think at the end of the day, it's that human component of storytelling.
Yeah.
That I don't, as advanced as AI as I can imagine it could be, I just don't think it replaces the human component of creating the story and crafting that message that's, to your point, authentic. And I think that's where what AI won't be able to replace, no matter how advanced it is.
Yeah, when we work with our clients, we spend a good amount of time listening and understanding what their goals are. And 90% of the time, they haven't literally done the exercise of saying some of the things that are in their head out loud. Right. So what's beautiful in that experience is as they are kind of saying it out loud and putting it in words that someone else can understand, maybe not for the first time, but perhaps the first time in a long time, that discovery process reveals things that weren't maybe evident before. Right. AI can only utilize what you give it. And so in that regard, the process of pre-production is vital, because there is a gift that, my wife and I have with, the years of training that I've had with, sitting down and learning people and how to listen and how to reiterate and help them understand sometimes even what they're not really sure how to express.
Right.
That is something a computer is not going to be able to do. But when it comes to, planning, say, for example, a full day of production, there's some things that AI can help you get done quicker. So that way you can just get more value out of ultimately our most precious commodity, which is time.
That's Ian Bennett, co-founder and co-owner of Lifted, a video music production company in Broomfield, Colorado. Thank you for taking time to listen to this episode. Don't forget to like and follow on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. And if you're watching this episode on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to this Professional Life channel. Take care. We will catch you in the next episode.